FPL computers and AI has been gaining a lot more traction in the more recent FPL seasons, and this year I'm seeing a lot of these tools being advertised and suggesting tools to optimize your own team and see the ratings and then use those to make your FPL decisions. But what I thought would be an interesting concept would be to take what these tools think are the most optimized team, what would give you 100% rating or whatever in them, and then have a look and critique these teams to see, basically, should you be basing your decision making and choosing between two players potentially based on what these algorithms are running. So I've taken a few different tools. There's no slander towards any of them. I'm comparing all the tools equally, making my own mind up, and then giving perhaps my 2 cents on what tools you should be using and which ones you should use for different things, and my favorite tool to use in order to optimize your FPL team. But yeah, we're going to kick things off with one of the most well-known, and that is Fantasy Football Hub. They've got the new My Team tool, which I think, for all good intents and purposes, is still a decent tool. And this is the team that would get you a 100% rating. And I want to put a disclaimer out here that as with football and FPL, things are always constantly changing. This draft that I took when I took it may not be actually the same team that if you go in and put into their Fantasy Football Hub would now give you a 100% rating. So it's forever changing, but I thought I'd just go through anyway and use the most current teams that I've managed to find. And that was from a Reddit post. I can't find the user on Reddit who actually made and put together this matrix, comparing and grabbing all the different teams. So thank you very much to them. If it was you, please leave a comment down below. I'll be able to give you some credit for it. But yeah, this is what Fantasy Football Hub came up with, and this is their side. So straight away, you can see Edison in goal at 5.5 million. Onana hasn't really been added into many of these algorithms. It's just a lot harder for them to base their decisions on players who haven't yet featured in the Premier League, which I'm assuming is why he doesn't feature in any of the sides seen here. But Edison at 4.5 million more expensive, I don't think particularly is that strong, especially when you're using one of your Man City slots that you're tripled up on in goal. So the algorithm isn't really going to be thinking about that later on down the line. It's not going to be considering as a computer, are we going to leave a slot open for another Man City option to come in maybe in midfield? If Foden starts the season off really well, you're in a bit of a predicament there because you're not going to sell Hull and you're probably not going to want to sell John Stones either, who is in defence. So Edison's the first problem for me really in this side. I like the rest of the defence, bar Fabian Schär. 5 million, I think the Newcastle fixtures just aren't good enough at all, and I think the share pick will be based off stuff like his expected goals from the last season, which were fantastic, but unfortunately his fixtures just aren't good enough, and you've got enough defensive cover in there already. You've got Stones, Estepinian and Gabriel, who would be the back three, you'd think, most weeks in, and Pinnock on 4.5 is another one who I don't think is too bad, not seeing mentioned too much, because most people prefer Henry, myself included. But yeah, Schär could easily be a 4.0 million defender, and you've still got the front seven that you're going to play every week anyway. So I think there's too many funds spent in the defence. In midfield, I think it's a pretty template midfield. The two 6.5s of Mbeumo and Matoma are obviously the most popular ones. Odegaard over Saka is the only real difference from what you'd call the community template, who's in the majority of teams. I personally also prefer Saka or even Martinelli over Odegaard, but still a very stacked midfield. And then Haaland and Jesus up front. Round off what is a pretty decent attack, I would say. So yeah, not too many issues with this team at all. I think Schär is the main standout one, Edison and that Man City triple up as well. And then Odegaard, could well outperform Saka or Martinelli, so I'm not going to go in on that too much. But other than that, I really, really like this side. And now Fantasy Football Scout, who have recently partnered with one of my favourite FPL tools, which is Plan FPL. So yeah, I'll leave a link to them in the description as well. I'm not sponsored by them in any way, link to them. I just know the guy who runs it. I think he's a really, really great tool. And you can now link your Fantasy Football Scout premium membership, I think it is, to Plan FPL if you have it. I personally don't. But yeah, this is the team that Fantasy Football Scout would have you as a 100% rating, so the ideal team for them, you'd say. Ramsdale at 5.0 million, I think, is now just bettered by Onana at 5 million, and also we're seeing links to David Raya for Arsenal, which is not an encouraging sign for anyone who does have Ramsdale in their side. It would indicate, that Ramsdale may even fall out of favour and may even be second choice to David Raya if he were to join Arsenal. So really wouldn't be confident with Ramsdale as things stand. As is the case with Trippier, I think it is just the fixtures. Same with Fabian Schär that we discussed in the last team. 6.5 million, you would say if they had good fixtures, he could arguably be underpriced. But the fixtures are just that bad, and the fact that there are other defensive options with much stronger fixtures at cheaper price points, although they might not have had as strong attacking data last season, I think there are better players you can go with there. I like Estepinian. Zinchenko's a bit more of a brave one, but equally one that no one's really given a look in over Gabriel. I think Zinchenko is, up there, probably second best Arsenal defensive asset behind Gabriel, but I still think he is second best just because of Gabriel's expected goals threat from set pieces. Zinchenko doesn't provide too much expected goal involvement data from himself. Then it comes Reece James, who I think is the second best Chelsea defensive option to go for. It's surprising to see him in over the likes of Ben Chilwell, you'd say. But the numbers would probably suggest that James is better in stuff like attacking expected FPL points per 90. Those kind of metrics. James has performed really, really well over the last couple of years when he's been on the pitch. Unfortunately, James just seems to can't stay fit at the moment. Malo Gusto is very capable backup as well. Chilwell on the other side has been firing in pre-season. He looks much better. He's getting into these goal-scoring positions for the exact same price for someone who actually looks fit. I think Chilwell is definitely a no-brainer over going for Reece James if you want a Chelsea defender in your team. And then finally, Bayer of the 4.0 million bracket. So interesting to see 4.0 does make it into this side. Bayer the one to go for. I'm not too sure the Burnley fixtures are that great. They've got that blanking game week 2, which shouldn't really matter. But yeah, equally, either way, which 4.0 million you go for, he's at least one of the ones that's in competition and should probably be starting. But yeah, still not my favourite of those picks if you were to really pin me on it. In midfield, we're seeing Kevin De Bruyne at 10.5 million. We're then seeing Enciso, Mbeumo, Foden, and then Raheem Sterling. So a very stacked midfield, but with some players that you're definitely not seeing in the majority of drafts. Kevin De Bruyne's got some fantastic historical FPL data, of course, that some algorithms will base more on, some won't base as much on. And I think in the case of De Bruyne, he's probably a wait and see when we've got other premiums like Erling Haaland at such an expensive price, struggling to even fit Trent or Salah in alongside him. I don't think De Bruyne is 10.5 million, particularly well spent. But yeah, maybe he will prove me wrong at the start of the season. We know what higher ceiling he can have when he's truly in form. Enciso at 5.5 million just hasn't got the minutes confirmed for me. 5.5 million when João Pedro up front at the same price could be taking a significant chunk of minutes away from the youngster. It's just not convincing enough for me to feature him in a 5-man midfield. I know you could play a 4-4-2, even a 4-3-3 with this team because it is really stacked and there's benching dilemmas which we'll get onto in a moment. But yeah, Enciso is still at 5.5. I think you could downgrade to a 4.5 and have a much better looking 4-4-2 in my view. Mbeumo I really like on penalties for Brentford. He's an obvious template pick, really. And then Foden at 7.5 million. Equally, a bit more of an exciting one. Not on penalties, but looks great from open play. Yeah, he's one of my favoured Manchester City assets. But going with a triple up on the City attack is something that I don't think I've seen at all in FPL drafts this year. And then Raheem Sterling, taking a gamble on this kind of first fixture for Chelsea. I still think the West Ham game is a decent fixture for them. Banking on them to return to form early with Raheem Sterling. Personally, I like the wait-and-see approach with Chelsea, just not so much because they've got poor fixtures in the first one and maybe even two, you could argue, although I personally think that West Ham fixture isn't going to be too much of a struggle. I more think it's because there are a lot of players in that Chelsea team. If you've got Chilwell, James could be fit, maybe Malo Gusto, 4 million. You've got Jackson, you've also got Nkunku up front. There's a lot of options, even Mudryk at 6.5 in midfield could become a pick. And so if you gamble on one at the start of the season and then it turns out, you don't want them and you want to go for another, in the case of Sterling, you could just change him to Mudryk, but you could work your way into something of a triple-up dilemma. Kind of was the case with the last draft with Man City. It's less likely, I'd say, with Chelsea, but still, Sterling is probably not one I'd gamble on. I'd want to wait and see who the standout Chelsea pick will be because there probably will become one apparent early on in the campaign. And up front, we've got Holland, we've got Gabriel Jesus, and then finally, we've got Calvert-Lewin, who is one that, again, like Reece James, just can't really seem to stay fit at the moment. If he can, Everton have some really, really nice fixtures. I think they're ranked highest over the first 8 game weeks for fixtures. It's just Calvert-Lewin can't seem to play consistent games, and with this team, although you've got the depth, I think it's better well spent if you just downgraded a few of the assets, maybe some of the more injury-prone ones even, and just went and invested it into upgrading players like Enciso, maybe more to the Arsenal assets, the Man United assets, of course, these players that we already know that feature in the general template. Next up, we've got Fantasy Football Fix, and they've got a different approach in goal. They've gone for a 4.5 million keeper, which we haven't seen yet, and that is in Jason Steele, who does look like he'll be the starting keeper for Brighton. If you had to put money on it, I would go for him, but they have brought in that new keeper who could well start, so unfortunately that's a bit of a risk to go with him, and it's going up with a double up on Brighton. It's not even going with him instead of Enciso, it's Steele and Estepinian. And whilst the first two fixtures are quite nice, after that they do kind of fall off a bit of a cliff for Brighton, and the clean sheet odds definitely take a drastic drop. So I'm not too keen on the double up myself. I think if you go Estepinian, maybe even having some money in the bank to switch over to a Chilwell a few game weeks in could be nice, although I don't recommend booking in any transfer, so to speak. I think that going with a different 4.5 million keeper might save you the headache of having a double up on the defence whose fixture difficulty doesn't end up that great a few game weeks into the campaign. But the rest of the defence, there are a few other players that I do really like. So Henry at 4.5 million, we already saw Pinnock in an earlier draft Fantasy Football Fix favour Henry over him. Gabriel, once again, makes a return into this one with Matty Cash as well, the Villa asset of choice. And whilst Villa don't have the strongest fixtures to kick off the season, I do like the look of going for a Villa defender. They look much, much better, one of the top teams in the league under Emery, and I can see that continuing this campaign. Cash, Pau Torres, probably the two that are going to be people picking between. We even saw Pau Torres maybe even featuring fullback, which was interesting, but Moreno is out with an injury. So Cash definitely a very solid 4.5 million option. Whether he be my preferred one over Henry, well, this draft has got two 4.5 millions in, so not worrying about that. The only thing is if a premium defender does become an option, then you might be struggling to get the cash in to find that. The midfield is where there's a few very, very rogue options. Mohamed Salah and Saka, not so much. Heung-min Son is one that I really like, and it's going to be a bit of a dilemma. If Kane leaves, does Richarlison become a better option than Son for 2 million cheaper, listed as a midfielder? But I think even if Kane stays, and maybe even more so if Kane stays, Son could become a really, really great FPL option. 9 million is a steep price tag, but he's a player that has proven himself as a very, very valuable FPL asset in the past. And I can see him returning to form. He's been playing with an injury over the course of last season. He had a pretty poor campaign by his standards, but still wasn't the worst season ever for sure. I can see him returning to form, and I hope he does return to form, to be honest. And when those fixtures get a little bit better for Spurs in game week 3, I think maybe then might be the time to jump on. And kind of like seeing and waiting with the Chelsea assets, you could do that with Spurs for the first 2 game weeks as well, and by then, Kane may well have left 2 game weeks into the season. Maybe that's as late as the transfer may occur. You could go for Son or Richarlison, make your mind up at that time, would probably be my more boring but preferred strategy, because ultimately, going with the boring and safe thing that the consensus is and what the template seems to be doing does often end up getting you a better rank at the end of the year, if that is what you're aiming for. Speaking of a better rank, I'm not sure that's where Morgan Gibbs-White and Willian are going to get you early on in the season. I'm not saying anything against Gibbs-White. I think he's a fantastic player, and at times in the season, I think he could become a really, really nice FPL pick. I wish Forest had better fixtures in a way, because then I would definitely be putting some consideration into him. They just have 3 pretty tricky away games in the first 4 fixtures: Arsenal, Man United and Chelsea. There are better options really. At 6.5 million, spending that 0.5 extra gets you an Mbumo, gets you a Matoma, even Mudryk if you want to take a risk, someone like Diaby coming in, Eze at Crystal Palace. Much more superior options with better fixtures than Gibbs-White. And Willian, kind of the same story. 5.5 million, not many other players around that price bracket. You'd rather just go with a 4.5 million, invest some more of that money maybe back into the defence or into upgrading Gibbs-White as well. And then you've got a nice looking 4-4-2 draft really. And up front it is just once again Haaland and Gabriel Jesus. So yeah, probably it's harder to say, maybe my least favourite of the draft so far, just because although there are a few more rogue picks, I think the balance is a little bit off. And yeah, too many punts with Willian, Gibbs-White, all these players in the midfield. So yeah, that's my take on that one. And next up, we've got Drafthound, who is a tool that I do actually use sometimes for the predicted points and for the clean sheet odds and the goal scorer odds in particular. I think they do a really good job of those. But yeah, Drafthound, this is what you get when you put in their optimized 11, and it is worth noting that this, I think, is over a shorter game week range than some of the others. So while some tools may optimize over 5 game weeks, 8 game weeks, Drafthound, from what I can find on the website, optimize over 3. So it's not really great when you're looking at looking over a long run at the start of the season. You're not going to be able to change your entire team after 3 game weeks. You're only going to have had 3 free transfers. If you're banking, you don't burn the second one. But yeah, so this is the team that is set up with, and 2 rotating keepers is what I found interesting in this one. I hadn't really looked at Steele and Arrizabalaga as a rotation pair at all, and over the first 4, it doesn't look too bad. But over the next couple of game weeks after that, you do get a few more dilemmas. And so whilst you might get Luton Wolves, Luton Nottingham Forest looking like a very appetising first 4 fixtures for your keeper, I don't really think it's worth the 9 million over just maybe setting and forgetting someone like an Onana and having a better long-term plan in place. We've then got Trent Alexander-Arnold coming back into the defence alongside Estepinian, Gabriel and Stones, who I all like as options. With 4 really good defenders already in there, I don't really see the need for Botman with how poor Newcastle's fixtures are. I'll bring that up again. We're seeing another Newcastle defender who I think will be a good team defensively this season. Whether they can get it through those first couple of fixtures, keep any clean sheets in them, will be a struggle and definitely a test for whether we can invest in them later on. But I'm assuming that Newcastle will come good at some point defensively. It's just not worth it spending even 0.5 more than someone like a Luton defender, like Kabore, and just having him, because you're not going to start him over any of the front runners, in my opinion, anyway, when you've got a midfield 4 and a front 2 who look pretty decent, as well as that back 4 that you're already set on. Might as well save the 0.5 million, in my view. In midfield, we've got Luis Diaz, who I'm going to put it out there, I don't think I've seen in a single FPL draft this year. And that's not really for a lack of ability, it's more for the fact that everyone's kind of being cagey about the Liverpool assets due to what might be rotation early on, and we don't know who's going to be certain starters. We've, of course, got Mohamed Salah, who's nailed in that front 3, but then you've got, Diogo Jota as well, you've got Cody Gakpo, so it's really those 4 options, including these 2 on screen, who are fighting for position. I think Luis Diaz is a great FPL option when he's on the pitch. It's just unfortunate that I won't be able to gamble on him because I don't know he's a starter. And even if he is, I'm not sure I'd go for him then. Diogo Jota will definitely come on in games and definitely get minutes off that left-hand side, or maybe even Nunez will be the one coming in off that left-hand side. I don't know. Starting with one of them maybe is a gamble worth taking. Starting with 2, you're definitely taking a risk. And you're banking that Jota and Gakpo aren't going to get many minutes by going with this combination. And you're also locking yourself out of bringing Salah in or bringing in another Liverpool asset by having this triple upset early on. I like Saka. Odegaard we've already discussed. I think there are probably better options. You could diversify and go for a Man United attacker in Bruno Fernandes for the same price and cover a few more of those different attacks, for lack of a better word. I know people don't like using the term cover. I do just think Bruno Fernandes is a better FPL option than Odegaard anyway. And then finally, we've got Grealish in this midfield. So going for him over Phil Foden, definitely not something that I would recommend for yourselves, to be honest. I think Grealish is far more a creative player. I don't think he is perhaps the most instinctive and direct driving goalwards player that Phil Foden is. There's a lot of breakdown on why Phil Foden will be a better asset really than Grealish. I think although Grealish will maybe be more nailed for minutes off the left-hand side, Foden is just the more superior FPL asset in my view to start the season with. They also have Ayari. I think it's a new signing for Brighton. I don't really know. 4.5 million for him, but wouldn't go with a Brighton 4.5 million midfielder. I think there are starting ones, first of all, who you could go with. Nakamba moving to Luton, who are just more guaranteed to get minutes, and also from sides that you're not going to want to end up with a triple up on. I know the Brighton fixtures kind of fall off a little bit, but Steele and Estepinian are already in this team. Imagine Matoma starts the season off really, really well. You're ruled out of getting him by having this in the team. And so far, what I'm seeing from these kind of AI generation teams is that they're not considering stuff like that a human would be able to do so with their brain. And then we've got Holland and, of course, Darwin Núñez, who we've already mentioned up front. So no room for Gabriel Jesus. If you wanted to upgrade to him, you wouldn't be able to because there's already, again, a locked-in Arsenal triple-up, and you'd have to have some money in the bank too. Personally, not my favourite draft, but, I don't particularly dislike going with a 4-man defence. I think the defensive back 4 looks really, really good. There's just a few other issues in this team. The standout probably being the Liverpool rotation could really screw you. And then finally, one of my favourite FPL tools on the internet, FPL.team, a really, really great planning tool for FPL, planning for future game weeks, all that stuff. This is the team they've put together with their predicted point system that would come out as 100% rating for them, their favourite side. And there are a few more differential options in here as well, and we'll discuss those too. So yeah, Edison returns back in goal. We've kind of already talked about him, not my favourite. Ake is then in here as a Manchester City option. So once again, a triple up featuring double Man City defence. Now, Vardiol was very well rumoured with Manchester City. That seems to have been gotten a here we go wrong by Fabrizio Romano. So 5 million for Ake, still more guaranteed minutes at the moment than we would have thought if Vardiol came in. That transfer could well still happen, and I do prefer spending the 0.5 million extra on John Stones, who's kind of playing in midfield. Ake is a good FPL option when he starts. It's just unfortunate that, those early subs are definitely going to be a risk for him in the Man City side, I would feel. And if Vardiol comes in, even a few game weeks into the season, when you're not wanting to use transfers unnecessarily, if that transfer happens later on, then you could be a little bit screwed, even more so than just with regular Pep Roulette. If Vardiol comes in, you'd imagine he'll be the starter for how much money they'd have to spend on him. So yeah, Estupinian and Gabriel I really like. Timber is one, again, who I'm not seeing in many drafts, and for good reason, to be honest. Is he going to play right centre-back over Saliba? Is he going to play right-back over Ben White? Personally, not sold on either. He can maybe fill in for both of them and provide cover in both positions, but unless we see an injury like we did with Saliba last season, there's no real reason to believe that Timber will be a regular starter for Arsenal, and 5 million just seems an unnecessary price tag, and taking up an Arsenal slot. Once again, the triple up is already locked in here. If you wanted to go Saka or Martinelli early on, you wouldn't be able to do that. Pinnock then returns instead of Henry, so that's 2 votes to Pinnock and 1 to Henry. So AI seems to be favouring Pinnock over going for Rico at left back, which, he has scored a few goals last season. I'm not going to say Pinnock is a worse asset, definitively. It's objective. It's not objective, it is subjective. But yeah, Henry, in my view, is a better asset from what I've seen in pre-season as well. I really like the look of him. Rashford in midfield, Bruno Fernandes as well. Then we've got some 6.5, so Mbumo, but they're not the Brighton 6.5 million midfielder you'll see in the majority of teams. Solly March makes it in, and whilst he hasn't been the absolute standout star in pre-season, I think he's got record from his last campaign in the Premier League that shows he's definitely in the mix for the 6.5 million midfielders. Matoma's getting all the praise and all the plaudits at the moment, and for the record, I do think he is a better option. But Solly March definitely not one to just fully rule out, and maybe he'll start the season off really well. It's just a problem that the Brighton fixtures, again, they may well still continue a really, really strong attack in through those kind of tougher few fixtures, a few game weeks in. But for me, Solly March are better 6.5 million options. We kind of already discussed Enciso as well at 5.5 million. You've got kind of a back 4. I don't even know what this defence is going to end up as. You've got minute struggles from Timber. You've got Pinnock, who's probably going to have to fill in. Whether it's even starting a back 4 this draft, I'm not really sure. But Enciso's minutes just make him unnecessarily spending 5.5 million there. Just go with a 4.5 million or find the funds to upgrade to another 6.5 million. Someone like an Eze, who we've not seen in any of these teams today. We've then finally got Erling Haaland and Gabriel Jesus up front, which is definitely the consensus front two, and then Cameron Archer. We've not seen Mbuma of West Ham in any draft so far, just because there's been recent news that he's going to be used by David Moyes so far this season. At 4.5 million at West Ham, I think is probably better spent on him than Cameron Archer, who will be back up to Ollie Watkins, and maybe Watkins will get injured and I'll be shown up for this one, but I would put money on him over Archer at the moment. 4.5 million, it shouldn't really matter anyway. You're only hoping for them coming into your team if it's a real last resort. But yeah, that's the final team, but the tool I'm really hoping to use and waiting for is this. This is the tool I'm really waiting for and excited to use, launching in the next few days, FPL Review. One that I use for clean sheet odds, prediction odds, predicted points. It's free to use. I'm not endorsed by any of these tools in any way to make this video. No one is paying me absolutely anything. You can be assured of that. But FPL Review are the one that I would use if I could only have one tool to set me a team each week this would be the one I would trust to get me the best FPL rank. And whilst there might be better tools in terms of Optastats, player heat maps, all this stuff that helps you make your own decision in your own head, which is my preferred way to play FPL, if I had to base it solely on an AI or an algorithm, FPL Review would probably be the one I would pick. For the record, I don't think AI is something you trust. We've seen through these teams, some of them are pretty shocking, you'd argue, and some you'd recommend a lot of changes to the drafts. But FPL Review would be my favoured one. We'll see what that team looks like in a couple of days, hopefully. I may even make a separate video on that, so leave a thumbs up if you would like to see. And if you enjoyed the video, just let me know down below in the comments if you've got any feedback in any way or some constructive criticism, then feel free to leave that down below as well. If you're new around here, feel free to subscribe to the channel, and I hope to catch you in the next one, in which I'll see you very soon. Goodbye.